Hi, my name is Dr. Matthew Anderson, and today I want to talk to you for a few minutes about how to best survive and even possibly move into what we might call a space or an attitude of thriving in the midst of this coronavirus event, crisis, experience that we're all going through. And I know everybody, if you're a normal person, has some anxieties and fears about this. So if you feel anxious and if you feel afraid, consider number one, that you're normal. And if you don't feel that way, either you're a highly developed person or you're in a great state of denial. But for those of you who are really experiencing this in a meaningful way, I want to tell you two stories. And if I had to give a title to this conversation I'm going to have with you, I would call it Two Stories and Two Choices. 1974, it's a long time ago, but I was alive in 1974. I had just gotten married in June, and my wife and I, in August of the same year, went on a 30-day workshop. It was a 30-day personal growth workshop. It was really intense, and it was something that people did in the 70s who were into psychotherapy and personal growth and the human development movement, human potential movement, I guess we called it then. It was a 30-day workshop. It was at a center way up in the woods in Maine, and there were 30 of us who were participants, and there were 4 trainers. And it was so intense. During those 30 days, we only had 2 days, a Saturday and a Sunday, somewhere near the middle of it, off. The rest of the time, we had sessions from 9 a.m. to 12, from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and from 7 to 10 every single day, 9 hours of sessions. That's why I said it's really intense. And we went through really creative personal growth exercises. We were working outside, we were working inside, we were working with each other, we were working within ourselves. And the whole experience was really incredible. And it was led by John and Joyce Weir, who were then sort of like the personal growth gurus in certain sections of professional training in the United States. But the point I want to make is we all wore name tags. And we didn't wear name tags with our name. Like I didn't have one that said Matthew on it. It didn't have one that said Matthew Anderson. We wore, after we got into the experience of the workshop, name tags that indicated some kind of issue or subject that we were working on. So somebody might call themselves anxiety, another person might call themselves fear, or somebody might say attached to mom. That was the name on the name tag. And you could change the name tag anytime you wanted. But we took these very seriously, and that's what we called each other all day long, in the session and out of the session. If we were having lunch or dinner, and we would call each other by those names. We did not use our given names. And so 2 weeks, about 2.5 weeks into this workshop, and the reason I'm telling you that is that this didn't happen in the first few days, the story I'm going to tell you. It happened after we had gotten really deeply involved in the deeper psychic awareness and imagination and exploration of issues, so that we were really in a sense, with the program. The leader, his name was John, came out one morning at the 9 o'clock session, and his name tag had been changed. This morning, what he had written on his name tag was death. And he said to all 30 of us, today, by 4 o'clock, you all will be dead. Now, no one laughed about this, because at 2.5 weeks into this process, we were all taking this seriously. We knew that we were supposed to in a sense, surrender to this idea, go with it, and that would benefit us if we took it in a realistic way. We would learn something from it. Now, there was one thing that now that I tell the story, I know it might sound funny, but it wasn't to us then. When he came out with his wife, Joyce, who was also a leader, but the other two leaders were not in the room. And after he said this, there was a pause, and we could hear the sound coming from the backyard of this place. It sounded like people digging. And it was. The other two people were out there digging. They were digging graves. And John said, some point during the next number of hours from 9 o'clock to 4, at some time before 4 o'clock, the death is going to come to you and touch you on the shoulder. And when the death touches you, you're dead. Then we're going to put a bag over your head, no talking, lead you out and put you in a grave and bury you. Now, he wasn't kidding. It wasn't that we were going to be 6 feet under, of course, but that's another story. But really, we laid down eventually, I laid down in a hole in the ground and was covered with about 8 or 9 inches of dirt with a tube that I could breathe out of, so that I had as close to an experience of being buried as they could create without actually killing me. Well, I knew how serious they were. Everybody knew, and everybody immediately took this seriously. So then he said, okay, now you're on your own. The rest of the day, just wait for death. So we did. Now remember, I said to you that I'd just gotten married just a couple of months before. My wife was there, and everybody went into, I guess, what we might call now the default behavior, meaning we went into what are we going to do, how are we going to deal with this, and we talked about it a lot between the two of us and then other people, and I'll tell you what happened in a second, but the reason I'm telling you the story is there was a woman in the group, I guess she was in her early 30s, who was so frightened by this idea of death that she went to a couch in the building itself, I guess it was in the lobby of the ski lodge that we were in, and covered her head with a jacket and lay there. And every once in a while, she would kind of scream if somebody came by. Now, what Death did when he saw that, and this was classic of John, every half hour or so, he would go over and pick this up so she could see that it was him with Death, and she would scream. You know, the phrase that I always grew up with when somebody was really screaming, she would scream bloody murder. You could hear her scream every single time he did it, all day long, to the extent of the property, and you couldn't get away from it. She was paralyzed with fear, terrified, and that's what she did all day long, was cover her head and scream every time she thought death was coming for her. Now the rest of us, 29 other people, all had all various levels of awareness and willingness to get into this. My new wife and I finally came to the conclusion that we needed to spend this time doing as much meaningful things as we could, being outside, paying attention to nature, interacting with each other. And it so happened that around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was sitting on the floor, really engaged in a conversation with her, to the point where I was not paying attention. I'd forgotten about death was coming. And they came and got me. And they laid me down on the floor, they put the bag over my head, they let me lay there for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then, without talking, they put me in the grave and covered me up, and it turned out to be a magnificent experience ultimately. But the point I'm telling you in the story is, this woman gave in to her fear, and from 9 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, she screamed every time death came near her. And he did not get her until everybody else was dead. He left her there to the end. She went into the grave, and then that night when we all came back to talk about our experience, she talked about how transforming that experience was once she gave into it and allowed herself to be buried. And she lay in the ground, I think, over an hour, covered. I think I lay there for about 45 minutes or so. It was a really powerful experience, which is another story. But the important thing I want you to hear here is she surrendered, caved into her fear to the point that she was completely paralyzed and completely caught up in her fear of death. And nothing else happened to her the entire day. 9 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. 7 hours of total fear. Just amazing. Incredible, amazing. Now, that was the first choice. The first choice is to give in to your fears, because I'm telling you, we all feel afraid about this. We all have anxiety about what's going on. What's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to me, my family? Are we going to have financial troubles? Are we going to have physical problems? Is somebody close to me going to get this? Am I going to get it? Am I going to be okay? Are they going to be okay? Am I going to die from it? That's a reasonable fear to have now. You're not crazy if you have those anxieties. The question is, are you going to choose to cave in to fear? Now, let me tell you story number 2. It was 1981, a number of years later. I was the chaplain at the San Diego Hospice. And my job as chaplain, I was there for a little over a year. My job as chaplain was to visit people and families, and particularly visit people who had been diagnosed. At that point, you had to have a diagnosis from a doctor saying you have 6 months or less to live, or hospice couldn't come and help you out. So I went to see this woman. She was in her late 70s. I think she was in her late 70s. That's why, best of my memory, she was. And I visited her at home. I remember it vividly based on what she told me. I was sitting there, just the two of us, in her living room. I remember looking out. There was a garden and big sliding glass window, doors, and you could see into the garden. It was really beautiful. It was in San Diego area. I asked her a question. I don't think I would ask that question now unless I had a very special connection to a person. But I never met this lady, and I was young, I was naive, and I thought I had a great question. And so I said to her, actually, I'm glad I asked it, but I don't know if I'd do it now. I said, what would you say was the best year of your life? And her answer stunned me. Just absolutely, I was not prepared for what she said. She said, the best year of my life started the day I found out I had cancer. The best year of my life started the day I found out that I had cancer. And I looked at her, I didn't know what to say. I was not prepared for that answer. And she looked at me. I know she knew she would surprise me with that. And she said, listen, I began to realize that everything is precious. Everything is precious. The knock on the door, somebody comes to see me, I'm happy. I don't care who it is. It's a male person. It is a friend. It is somebody I don't have a great relationship with. I don't care. The sun comes out, I'm happy about that. It rains, I enjoy the rain. I'm telling you, it has been the most wonderful experience I've had in my life of how precious everything is. I am grateful for everything. I was so struck by that. I was so moved by that, that as I'm telling you the story right now, and I've told this story hundreds of times. What was that? Almost 50 years ago. 45, 46 years ago. I remember her face. I remember the couches that we were sitting on facing each other. I remember the glass sliding doors and the sunshine outside in her garden. I was so struck by her answer. It struck me deep inside. A choice. She made a choice. Not to succumb to fear the way that other person did. She didn't cover her head and said, oh my God, I'm dying. Oh my God, I'm going to die. Oh my God, I'm going to die. She chose to choose looking, paying attention to the preciousness of everything that showed up in her life. And I venture to say she was more alive in the last year of her life than she was in all the years put together. It was such a magnificent, transformative experience for her. She chose another way to look at this. So I'm saying to you, we all have a choice. When we are in crisis, when the world is upset, when we are worried about money and health and relationships or whatever it is that we are realistically have a reason to be frightened about, we still have a choice. We still have a choice. We can choose fear. We can choose to cover our heads and scream every time we think about it. Or we can choose to look at the preciousness of life within and without us. We can become grateful for all the things that are there in our lives. And I'm telling you, there are lots of them if we make the choice. There are lots of them if we make the choice. So I'm inviting you, I'm imploring you, I'm encouraging you, I'm even challenging you to get up today after you listen to this video and say to yourself, all day long I have two choices. From the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep tonight, I have two choices over and over and over again. Am I going to choose fear, or I'm going to choose gratefulness and a willingness to see the preciousness of life? I hope you will share this with other people. It makes a difference when we know we have those two choices and we choose the second one. The second one, gratefulness and a willingness to see and experience the preciousness of life, of your life and of mine. God bless you. Have a precious, wonderful, grateful day.